Well, good morning, church. Good morning. We are glad you are with us this morning. Mike is correct, but I didn't just say we know when it's cold. I said if you drive from here to California, you go by the big thermometer in Bryan. Wherever you live, there's always some way to know it's cold, and we know it's cold because Mike, this is only the second time this year he's been in pants, right? So he's always in cargo shorts. So when you can't see Mike's legs, you know that it's cold. So that's what I know. Welcome. I'm glad you guys are with us this morning. My name is Rod. I'm one of the pastors here, and I am glad you are here. We are in the middle of our series called I Am. We identify with so many things. We say, I am a son, a father, a grandpa, a pastor, an electrician. I might say politically, I'm independent, I'm German, I'm a Christian, I'm an American. All of these things speak to my identity. Jesus spoke of who he was in powerful, symbolic terms with powerful imagery. And this really helps Jesus share his identity with us. Paul tells us to find our identity in Christ. He says this no less than 35 times in the book of Ephesians. And if our identity is found in Christ, then we want to know who is Jesus. And in this series, we're looking at the 7 I am statements in the book of John. Week 1, we started with the statement of I am, right? When God says, I am who I am. And we found out that the name Yahweh is actually a pun. It's that phrase put all together. In other words, I am what I do. Every name of God, there's over 100 of them in God, are all about what he does. Right? God is the creator, the shepherd, the one who saves, the one who sees. God's name is that way. So we talked about how the statement I am means I will only be understood by my own subsequent actions or word of revelation. And then Jesus comes and he uses these I am statements much the same way. Week 1, we saw John 8:12, I am the light of the world, right? Jesus is the one that brings light into the darkness, the one who saves. John 6:35 last week, I am the bread of life. In other words, the one who sustains. I will never be hungry again when I accept the bread of life. We discovered that with Jesus's I am statements, they're connected to 3 things. They're connected to an Old Testament motif, something the disciples would understand. They were followed by a revelation. Jesus is trying to tell us who he is. And it's also like the phrase Yahweh, it's tied to something that Jesus does. In other words, it's not just a statement out of nowhere. It's set in a specific time with a specific action to communicate a specific thing. This week, we're going to be looking at the statement out of John 10, I am the good shepherd. And this may be the most normalized of all the I am statements. We know what a shepherd is. At least you've seen them every year in the nativity scene. It symbolizes a real person. This was a common job to the disciples, and it would have had a lot of nuance and meaning to it. But this morning, in order to understand this statement that Jesus says, we need a bit of a contextual lesson from the Old Testament. So I'm going to try to unpack the book of Ezekiel in 5 minutes or less. Now bear with me. It's a really thick book. It's got a lot of stuff in it. We're going to skip through a lot of things, but I think it's important to understand as we go forward. So Israel was at war with Babylon, and they lost the first battle, and Babylon took Israel into captivity or into exile, a portion of the people, right? So a portion of the people had been brought into slavery into Babylon. And there was a prophet of God who lived during this time named Ezekiel. And his story is told in the book of Ezekiel, right? Amen. Okay, we'll move on. No. We see Ezekiel during his 30th birthday as the book opens, which is important. It would have been the time where he would have started to be a priest and work for God. And God speaks to Ezekiel from the throne and commissions him as a prophet. Then he calls him to accuse Israel of breaking their covenant and warn them of imminent destruction. Think of that conversation. God speaks, Rod, I love you. You're doing a good job. I want you to be my voice. Awesome. I can't wait. That sounds great. What do you want me to say? Well, I want you to go tell the people they're sinning, and I'm going to destroy them if they don't stop. I'm sure he was like, you got anything else to say? Can I tell them they're really nice? You like their outfits? What do you, nope, stick to the script. And God calls him into a form of street theater. So think of going down to the strip and you have people performing and doing all kinds of things. That's what Ezekiel did. I do not have time to go through all of the different performances he did, but he was performing to show Israel how broken they were. A year after his first vision, in chapter 11, Ezekiel gets a vision of the temple and sees God's presence leaving the temple, which would have been a big thing for the Jewish people. The temple was always where the presence of God was. And Ezekiel sees God's throne and his presence leaving and heading towards Babylon. He was disappointed, but think about the people who were in exile. What God was showing Ezekiel is God was with those people. In their darkest times, in their darkest hour, God was still with them. And what's interesting in Ezekiel is every time God brings this doom and gloom vision that if they don't straighten out, they're going to be in trouble, he also brings hope. There's always hope. And the rest of the book follows this format. Chapters 12 through 24 in Ezekiel are judgment on Israel. 25 through 32 are judgment on the nations. And then in 33, we see Ezekiel meets this refugee who tells him, Ezekiel, your warnings have come true. The rest of Israel has been brought into exile because they didn't listen to God. The same pattern, like I said, holds true. And then the rest of the book is divided into three sections. There's hope for Israel, there's hope for the world, and then there's hope for Israel, there's hope for the nations, and then the world. But I want to just read really quick a little bit of the three metaphors that gives Israel hope, because the disciples would have known this during Jesus' time. The first one I want to read comes out of Ezekiel 34, and the title of this chapter is called "The Lord Will Be Israel's Shepherd." Right? In fact, it starts this way. The word of the Lord came to me, Son of man, prophesy against the shepherds of Israel. Prophesy and say to them, this is what the sovereign Lord says. Woe to you, shepherds of Israel, who only take care of yourselves. Should not shepherds take care of the flock? You eat the curds, clothe yourself with the wool, and slaughter the choice animals, but you do not take care of them. You have not strengthened the weak, or healed the sick, or bound up the injured. You have not brought back the strays, or searched for the lost. You have ruled them harshly and brutally. So this is one of those tough messages. Ezekiel says, go to Israel, go to the religious leaders and say, you've made it all about you. Right? You don't care if they're taken care of. You're not bringing them hope or love. If they leave, you're like, good riddance. I hope you go find someplace else to worship. You just let them go. And so he continues on, and then in verse 11 he says, for this is what the sovereign Lord says, I myself will search for my sheep and look after them, as a shepherd looks after his scattered flock when he is with them. So I will look after my sheep. I will rescue them. Right? I will bring them out of the nations. I will bring them into their own land. So he just talks about how much the Lord will be our shepherd. And then I love in the next chapter, he has another metaphor here, which is really beautiful. Ezekiel 36, he says this, for I will take you out of the nations. I will gather you from all the countries and bring you back to your own land. I will sprinkle clean water on you, and you will be clean. I will cleanse you from all your impurities and from your idols. I will give you a new heart and put a new spirit in you. I will remove from you the heart of stone and give you a heart of flesh. And then right after that in Ezekiel 37, there is this metaphor of the valley of dry bones. And he takes Ezekiel and he shows him this valley where everybody's been dead for a really long time and it's just a pile of bones, and God breathes on it, and all of a sudden these bones come to life, and then there are men walking around. And what it does is it harkens back to the creation, but it's something different. God is saying, there will be a time soon where my Spirit will breathe new life. Where you were spiritually dead, you will be alive. So Jesus is alive. Jesus dies. He raises again. He's talking to the disciples. The disciples are like, now what do we do? And he says, I want you to wait around for the festival of Pentecost. Now, this festival was a Jewish festival which represented the bringing of the law or the giving of the law. It was 40 days after Passover. It was when Moses came down and gave them the law. And so the disciples said, sure, I'll hang out. And they hung out, and it was all of a sudden, there was this wind and the Spirit fell on people. It was the giving of the Spirit, right? It was a renewing of this, what we would call Pentecost. And with the giving of the Spirit, these three metaphors come true. The second one, that God would put a new spirit in us. In other words, when we know that we have gone astray and that when we have broken the commands, no matter what we do, we try and be good enough. And Rod, I tried to, but somebody cut me off this morning and I waved at them with one finger. Or my kids, they weren't listening to me and I yelled at them this morning because I wanted them to look good for church, and now they're just wearing crazy stuff. And, whatever it is, and I barked at my wife this morning. Whatever it is, you're like, I know I can't make it. But if you accept the work that Jesus Christ did on the cross, like it says in Ezekiel, he'll put a new spirit in you. He makes you clean. He takes out this broken heart that you could never worship God with anyway, because in Romans we're told we are enemies of God and we become friends of God. Right? And as God spoke over the bones and they came to life, all of a sudden you are given a new life. And like a good shepherd, the Holy Spirit dwells inside of you to comfort you, to guide you, to be somebody who walks with you every day. So, why is that important? Well, because the disciples would have been looking for these prophecies to come true during the time of Jesus. So it's with this backdrop that we understand Jesus makes this statement in John 10. John 10, 11 through 16, I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd sacrifices his life for the sheep. A hired hand will run when he sees a wolf coming. He will abandon the sheep because they don't belong to him and he isn't their shepherd. And so the wolf attacks them and scatters the flock. The hired hand runs away because he's working only for the money and doesn't really care about the sheep. I am the good shepherd. I know my sheep and they know me. Just as my Father knows me and I know the Father, so I sacrifice my life for the sheep. I have other sheep too. They are not of this sheepfold. I must bring them also. They will listen to my voice, and there will be one flock with one shepherd. I have talked about this before, that last couple lines. You should be grateful for that, because he was talking to Israel and he says, I have other sheep, and that's us. We didn't grow up Jewish. We're not living in Israel, but we are part of the fold. We've also been talking about how, so Jesus makes this statement and it's got to connect to something else, an act he does. So let me bring you, now we have to wait till the end of the book of John to see how this all connects, but it's the end of the book of John. Jesus has died, he's been resurrected, and the disciples are going out to work as fishermen, and they show up and there's this guy there, and breakfast is being cooked, right? So it's fish that's frying, and they say that they don't want to ask who it is. They kind of know it's Jesus. And so then Jesus asks them to sit down. So think about it this way. You're getting ready to go to work. You come down from your bedroom, and all of a sudden there's somebody sitting at your table, and he's got breakfast. He's got the Cracker Barrel Grandma's sampler all cooked up. You get a little bit of everything in there, really good hearty breakfast, and he says, sit down, we need to have a conversation. And that's what happens in John 21. After breakfast, Jesus asked Simon Peter, Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? Yes, Lord, Peter replied, you know I love you. Then feed my lambs, Jesus told him. Jesus repeated the question, Simon, son of John, do you love me? Yes, Lord, Peter said, you know I love you. Then take care of my sheep, Jesus said. A third time he asked him, Simon, son of John, do you love me? Peter was hurt that Jesus asked the question a third time. He said, Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you. And Jesus said, then feed my sheep. He was restoring Peter. Peter had denied him 3 times. He asked him 3 times. And the restoration of Peter looks like he's making him a shepherd. So if Jesus is calling the disciples to care for his flock, to step into the role of shepherd, then what does a shepherd look like? That's a big question to ask, right? Because if we understand what a shepherd looks like, we will understand when Jesus says, I am the good shepherd. I used to pastor in Alaska. I was there a very short time. I was struggling to try and figure out my role as a shepherd. What does that mean? And I was sitting at my desk and I came across this blogs. I know it's not a podcast we didn't have social media back then. It was, we just wrote these online diaries. And I came across this blog from somebody in England. And this picture came up and I loved the picture. And so what I did was I emailed her. It took a couple weeks for her to get back. And I said, can I just have the picture? She sent it to me. I developed it. It's been on my desk or on my shelf in my office. If you ever come visit, it's been on there 17 years. This is what the picture looks like. Seems like an innocuous picture. That is a shepherd in Ireland watching over his flock. So here's what it reminds me. The role of a shepherd never changes. The methods always change. Like, because I'm a shepherd, I don't need to wear sandals and I don't need to wear robes. That the methods are always, the way we shepherd today is different than we shepherd pre-COVID, right? And that was different than 20 years before. So let's figure out what a shepherd is. But before we figure out what a shepherd is, I want to unpack the nature of a sheep. Because a dairy farmer does things different than a shepherd does, right? And so the role of a shepherd actually has a lot to say about what the sheep are like. So let's talk about sheep. Sheep are social creatures. Sheep follow the herd, right? One person does it another. And if you don't think you're a sheep, here's one thing I heard my whole life growing up. If your friends jumped off a bridge, would you too? I might, right? I mean, sheep just follow the herd. Sheep are emotionally complex creatures. Me too, sheep. Me too. They're defenseless. The only thing they can do is stay together, and when they get frightened, they just run in all directions. Sheep are a little stinky. Sheep bite. They bite each other. They bite the shepherd. But they have a good memory. They learn a shepherd, and they follow him for the rest of their lives. So in biblical sense, you are sheep. Now, I know there was this brand of clothing during the pandemic that everybody was wearing. I'm a lion, not a sheep. I know you think you're a lion, you think you're really bad, you're really tough, you're really strong. You're just a sheep. I love you, sheep. I love you. I'm one of you. We are sheep. We are sheep in a biblical sense. So let's look at the role of a shepherd in light of who the sheep is. The first thing, a shepherd knows the condition of their flock. Sheep need constant monitoring. They have sickness, disease, injury. It spreads throughout the flock. They bite each other. They can be dirty animals. A good shepherd checks their flock daily. This isn't a one and done. Like, hey, I checked the flock 5 years ago. I'll come out and see what it is. A good shepherd looks his sheep over every day. In fact, a good shepherd counts his sheep daily, and when one is missing, he has to figure out what to do. Here's what Jesus says about it. Luke 15, so Jesus told them this story. If a man has 100 sheep and one of them get lost, what will he do? Won't he leave the 99 others in the wilderness and go to search for the one that is lost until he finds it? And when he has found it, he will joyfully carry it home on his shoulders. When he arrives, he will call together his friends and neighbors saying, rejoice with me because I have found my lost sheep. It matters when you're lost. Jesus chases you down. He checks in on you. Church, Jesus knows what you walked in here today with. He knows when you're doing well. He knows when you're suffering from anxiety or worried about your kids, or struggling through the loss of a loved one. Maybe struggling to make ends meet in this economy, and the finances just don't seem to be going far enough. Maybe you feel like your marriage is broken. But I want you to hear this. Jesus checks in every day, every minute with you. The question is, are you checking in with him? Do you think he cares? Do you think he even hears you? Do you play hide and seek with Jesus? I'm good at this. Jesus will show up at my house, knocks on the door. I open the door, he comes in. He goes, man, Rod, this house looks really clean. But can I go see in the back room? The back room seems, and I'm like, no, you can't go see that. I've shoved everything in that closet. Don't go look in there. And he's like, you can let me in. I'm like, sorry, it's locked. He goes, you have the keys in your hand. I'm like, well, no, never mind. Right? Like, don't go look in my junk drawer. But what Jesus wants to do is go into the messy parts of your life. He's not looking to just go into the areas you think that you've cleaned up and like, Jesus, sit here. This is the perfect. Don't go anywhere else. He wants to see all of it. And the problem is we play hide and seek with Jesus like he doesn't know. Jesus is like, Rod, how are you doing this morning? I'm like, I'm great. He goes, no, you're not. Oh, yeah, no, I am. Right? We lie like somehow if we're honest and we say it out loud, Jesus, I just don't feel like I have it today. I feel like I'm falling apart emotionally, like mentally, I just don't know where I am. I need your help. Somehow it makes it real. So if we don't say it, we pretend like it's not real. But it is real. And a good shepherd is checking in on you every day. We should be talking to him as well. The second one, a shepherd helps the sheep identify with him. Once you say yes to Jesus, the goal is to look more and more like him every day until you die. That's our whole goal, that we want to look more and more like Jesus every day. I love in Matthew 25:32, Jesus is telling a story, and he says, all the nations will be gathered in his presence, and he will separate the people as shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. I don't have time to really get in depth with this, but basically, he's going to separate people to people who look like him and people who don't know him. And so our goal is to look more and more like him every day. How do you see yourself? Do you see yourself as an American who goes to church, or do you see yourself as a Christian that lives in America? Are you a teacher, a lawyer, a doctor, or engineer that goes to church? Or are you a Christian who works in one of those professions? Do you see yourself with the mark of Jesus or something else? When I was growing up, I remember one of my chores was to chop wood. My dad would be out there, we'd be chopping wood, separating wood. And I remember I asked him this question one time. I said, Dad, I think I want an allowance. And he gave me maybe the best answer that ever came out of that man's mouth. I allow you to breathe the air. That's your allowance, son. It's like, that's fair. Now, just so you know, my parents are good people. There was times they would figure out how to let me earn stuff. I remember I wanted this thing called an alarm clock. I know you younger people don't know what it is. You can Google it. But I had a radio and a little digital thing. And so they let me earn a little money. We're older. My son comes to me, I don't know, 10, 12, and he says, Dad, I want an allowance. You know what I said? I allow you to breathe the air. That's your allowance. What was taught to me, I teach to my kids. It just goes that way. Discipleship is the same way. Jesus taught people who taught people who taught people who taught you how to be that way. And we want to replicate it. What we're always looking for is this shortcut with discipleship, right? I said yes to Jesus. All my problems are going to go away. Everything's going to be perfect. And that's just not the way it works. And we have to learn to be disciples. Church, my prayer for, I believe this morning thing, disciple is the only engine that the church has. We can't be cool, we can't be hip, we can't be better than the society, right? I mean, we're never going to be more entertaining. You can go to the Sphere. This is not as entertaining as that, as much as I think it is to me. It's just, we can never outdo the world, but what we can do is we can be disciples that make disciples. And if we do that, the church will be stronger than ever, and you'll see your neighbors and your friends come to Jesus. You'll see flowers on the platform because of the work we do as disciples. disciples. Now, around here, we have many ways to do that, and you can jump on the Church Center app after service and sign up. If you're a brand new Christian, we have a class called Jumpstart, and I love that. It's taught by the pastors. I love teaching it. If you're brand new, you don't know anything, you just came to faith, Jumpstart, a 4-week class. We'd love to have you in there. We have our Connect class. We have Bible studies. I do a 1-year discipleship course called Mosaic Leadership Academy. I would love if you're at that next level and looking what to do to join me. All you have to do is you go out to the Welcome Center, you grab a letter like this. It explains everything. I'm getting ready to start one in 2 months for my next round. I would love you to join me because we want to pass on what we learn. I want you to identify with who Jesus is. We want to be Jesus followers that look like the shepherd. The next one, a shepherd keeps his sheep safe. Sheep have one defense: stay together. That's it. It's your only defense you have. Stay together, right? The coyotes and wolves want to scatter. I would tell you Satan wants to scatter you. He wants to make you afraid and run off. And you've all seen National Geographic of what happens when they get separated from the herd, right? We want to stay together. But sheep get scared and run. Look at this, Psalm 23. The Lord is my shepherd. I have all that I need. He lets me rest in green meadows. He leads me beside peaceful streams. He renews my strength. He guides me along right paths, bringing honor to his name. Even when I walk through the darkest valley, I will not be afraid, for you are close beside me. Many of you know that even when I walk through the valley, through the shadow of death, right? So there are valleys in our lives. And the shepherd wants to keep us safe. And I know when I say the shepherd wants to keep you safe, what you hear is, Jesus will make my pasture safe. I didn't say that at all. When we say yes to Jesus, your problems are not going to go away. Jesus won't always protect you from bad things. Like we just read, sometimes we're going to be in valleys. Maybe sometimes we'll be on mountaintops. But Jesus is guiding us into protection by leading us into righteousness. You want to know how we get protected? We walk in righteousness. And then we can be safe because he will be transforming us no matter what the pastures look like. But so often we walk in brokenness, and there's pitfalls everywhere. We don't see them. And then Jesus is like, let me help you out. And he helps us out of a pitfall, and then we're like, I got it from here. And we look exactly like this sheep right here. Ever been there? I got it, Jesus, I can do it. I got to figure, I love how he jumps vigorously right back in. I'm sure the people are like, go bring him out again, right? So funny. But it's just what we do. Jesus doesn't make our world free from trouble, but he can help by training us up to walk in holiness, to flee from the devil, to identify with him. Then we can be okay no matter what our environment. Remember to stick together, church. Don't get scared and run off. If the world is chewing you up, wearing you out, welcome home. I'm glad you're here. We say it all the time, but we really mean it. We are better with you here. This is a place of safety, a place to become more and more like Jesus, a place where it's okay to not be okay. But that statement, I don't always love that statement. I want to take it a step further. I always say this, come as you are, but don't stay that way. Right? Come as you are. It's okay. Be broken. I always say people don't win the lottery and then, or win the Super Bowl and they put the microphone in Tom Brady and say, you just won the Super Bowl. What are you going to do? I'm going to go to church. No, we go to church when we're like, man, there's nothing left. I'm broken. I don't know the answer, but maybe they have some sort of answer. So if you came in here, it's okay. Whatever you've got dragging behind you, it's okay. But we believe that once you get here, that we learn who Jesus is and we come together and we start to look more and more like him. So come as you are, just don't stay that way. Jesus teaches and guides us primarily with two things, a staff and a rod. A shepherd uses the staff of direction. I love this, Matthew 9:36. When he saw the crowds, he had compassion on them because they were confused and helpless like a sheep without a shepherd. Without a shepherd, we wander. We do what's right in our own eyes. How's that been working out for you? Left to my own devices and to the wisdom of the world, I end up broke, alone, and lost. But with Jesus leading, it's different. We like to think it's not scary, but faith-filled risks are always scary. And Jesus doesn't promise to remove the risks. He promises to walk among us through them. I have a great example of this. My daughter was, I think, a freshman in high school, and she was going through some very deep emotional things. And she was sharing with us one night, and Diane and her were crying about this stuff that my daughter had to walk through. And I was sitting over, like in a rocking chair, just kind of sitting there listening. And it was kind of a break in the conversation. And she looked over and said, "Daddy, what do you think?" And she came over and she sat on my lap. And I just cried with her, and I said, "Honey, I never wanted you to go through this. I know this isn't what God wanted for you. I'm so sorry you had to walk through this. But here's my promise to you. I will walk through it with you. You won't be alone. And no matter what you go through, we will go through it together." And in that moment, one of the only times I've heard God spoke, he said, "This is Jesus with you." Right? So often we go through tough times and we get angry at God. God, why did you allow this? And Jesus is holding you saying, "I really wish this never would have happened. I'm so sorry. But my promise to you is I will walk with you no matter what. You will never be alone. We can get through anything together." Now, absolutely, thank you. When we trust Jesus, we let him direct our steps. Every time I'm following his direction, I've been terrified and grateful. You feel me, church? Like, really, this is how you want me to go from Alaska to Salem to Vegas? From switching careers to joining a community group to being willing to walk with people that are hurting? From calling and forgiving people that I really don't want to forgive? To choosing not to take offense when I've been wounded? To sacrificing for my family when I want to be selfish? His direction isn't easy, but it is worth it, church. The next a shepherd uses is the rod of correction. Proverbs 15:32, "If you reject discipline, you only harm yourself. But if you listen to correction, you grow in understanding." Amen? I know, right? Everybody looks like they lost their keys. They're looking down. We don't like correction. This is a difficult issue that we don't like. We don't even want to talk about it. We want God to be happy with who we are and not disagree with my choices. Right? I'm just being me, God. Aren't you on board with what I'm doing? Church, this isn't following God. This is making yourself God. And society does this very, very well. God is loving, but he is also very specific about right and wrong. What to worship, what not to worship. Right? And we do what we want. We don't want to be corrected. My kids, I think they believed growing up that I couldn't manage a trip to the store, right? I was just an idiot. They had it all figured out. They were so smart. And I have a great example of this. We would go to this place called the Alaska State Fair, and my kids would have, let's say, birthday money or Christmas money, and we would walk by this stupid little stand with all these little toys, right? A toy like this. And they'd be like, "Dad, I really want this thing." And I'd be like, "No, you don't. You really don't. It's going to get wrapped around your wrist. It's going to hit you in the face. It's going to break 5 minutes after you get it. You're going to be sad that you spent your money on that." "No, Dad, I really..." And we'd be in this negotiation. And finally I'd be like, "Okay, go ahead." And they'd get it. You know what happened? It'd wrap around their wrist. It'd hit them in the face. They'd be crying. It'd break 5 minutes after. "Can I take it back?" I'm like, "No, you can't take it back. I wish I never spent my money on..." I know. I tried to tell you. What do you think I was doing? How often is that God with us? We're like, God, you don't know. If you just let me be my true self. If I could just go do this, I'd be fine. And God's like, you don't want to do that. You're going to ruin relationships. It's going to wrap around your wrist, going to hit you in the face. It's going to break 5 minutes. And you're like, no, this is it. And he's like, I'm telling you, I know what's better. You don't think so, but you're just, and then we go do it. And God comes back and we're like, God, I'm so sorry. Look at what happened. It wrapped around my wrist, hit me in the face, it broke. And he's like, I told you. I tried to warn you. And then with correction, what's funny? Have you ever been mad at somebody because they're mad at you? No, just me? You do something wrong. Somebody takes offense, they're mad at you, and then you're mad at, how dare they? Like I thought I said I was sorry. We do the same thing with God. Right? All of a sudden, we do something very wrong, correction comes our way, and then we don't say, yep, you're right, I shouldn't have done this, oh my goodness. We get mad at God. Well, why did God? I was the one that did the wrong, but he should never be mad. He should just love and be happy. It's what we do. And then we pray things like, God, if you would just please get me out of this. If you help me through this, I'll never do it again. And then we're the sheep and we jump right back in. But once again, God will be with us, but he just doesn't remove our consequences. God is a loving father, and a loving father disciplines. It's part of his role. He guides us in holiness. He corrects us when we step out of line. And there's a difference. So often I think we have these skewed views of God. We view God as Zeus, right? He's holding a lightning rod and he's just waiting for us to step out of line, but that's not the God we worship. In fact, we are told that the God we worship is a loving father. In fact, he loves you more than your human father, and he only gives good gifts. But the problem is, we don't see it that way because we feel the consequences, and we somehow think that we should be different than everybody else and we should avoid consequences. I love it. James, stepbrother of Jesus, said this: so humble yourself before God, resist the devil, and he will flee from you. Come closer to God, and God will come closer to you. Even in the middle of the problems, even in the middle of the angst, we want to come closer. Jesus is good, church. He is the light of the world. He's the one that removes the darkness. He is the bread of life, the one that fills us and sustains us. And he is the good shepherd, the one that leads us into green pastures and comforts us. So recognize this: you are the sheep. And the good shepherd, he knows you. He's checking in on you daily. He helps you become more and more like him. He helps you find safety. He guides you and corrects you. All of this because he is good. Let's pray.